The South African Chamber of Commerce and Industry has said that South Africa's licensing of business bill will impact confidence, undermine job creation and add another layer of bureaucracy to the business licensing process. Joining us now to explain its criticism of this is the CEO of the South African Chamber of Commerce, Narendra. Naren, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Are we going to see you toy-toying in the streets to protest against this? Because that's what everybody does, right? You're unhappy with something, you take to the streets, wave a few things around, maybe bang a few cars, and then you get what you want.
Well, unfortunately, that's not the way of business. We rely still very strongly on negotiation, on established mechanisms of engagement with government, which in this case means that government would table a piece of legislation, a proposed piece of legislation. We would then table a response, which is usually dependent on our members' perspective on that piece of legislation.
Right.
And then we'd sometimes go to Parliament and engage even further and offer counter solutions to where we see problem areas.
Okay, so let's start with this one now. Where are we? What are you unhappy with?
Well, there's a number of areas where we see problems.
Apologies to bring you onto studio when you're not feeling
sorry.
well. Yeah, absolutely. Please take your sip of water because we want to understand what business is completely unhappy with, because government is saying they are trying to weed out two things. One, it's illegal trade in goods. Two, illegal practices, so people who are operating illegally, if you like.
And those are definitely welcomed objectives. Those are objectives that our members have long had challenges in respect of.
Right.
Excuse me. But what our concerns stem from is the way in which this bill seeks to address those challenges, and that is by introducing an additional layer of red tape for small and medium enterprises in particular, where those enterprises now have to deal with local municipal entities to get themselves registered.
Yeah.
As we know, there are currently enormous capacity constraints at that level. So one of our proposals is that if government decides to proceed with this bill, that they look to the chambers as a source of support for making this happen. But really to us, the key issue is not the illegal activities that are currently going on and this bill seeks to eradicate. It's the fact that even under the current legislation, enforcement and policing is weak. So even if you raise the bar, if you introduce this new piece of legislation, you still haven't addressed the enforcement and policing issues. You do give the police officers more authority within this bill, but all that will happen is if you don't address the capacity issues on that front, you will raise the bar and you will achieve a lesser compliance than you hope to achieve. So in other words, our suggestion to government is not to create more and more new legislation, but to look at your ability to enforce the existing legislation, all of which is very sound and all of which already deals with the challenges addressed in this bill.
Right. Now, Naren, you said that you don't want new legislation put into place, but to look at the current legislation in place. How would that work? Because clearly they've brought something else in, into the picture to address this. Is it not working because we still have illicit operators out there?
Absolutely, and many of our business members, many small and medium enterprises have challenges in that regard, where these illicit operators compete with them on an unequal footing. And this sets our formal enterprises, our compliant enterprises back somewhat. But there are other ways of dealing with that. And the principal way that we're tabling is to strengthen the enforcement capacity. Now, currently you don't have enough feet on the ground to go into enterprises to inspect licenses. And this bill in itself is not going to change that circumstance. All this bill does is say that you need this additional license, but it doesn't address the capacity issues around the inspectorate. So all you're doing for the compliant businesses is you're forcing them to abide by an additional layer of compliance, more red tape to contend with, and that's the problematic aspect from our side. Yeah,
it's interesting. I was reading Leon Law from the guys who advocate for business to be at the forefront, and Leon is using some very choice words to describe this. He says it's a surreal draft, and it's how to maximize waste and corruption, and he sees this as enforcement of more wall-to-wall apartheid style laws by bureaucrats. And I mean, we're going back and describing a situation. It's almost like this is one of the most dire pieces of legislation that has come through in recent years. What's your sense? Is he going overboard, or really this is a big issue for business and it really needs to be held back, or else we're going to see business crumbling under the pressure of this new draft?
Well, given the mandate of the Free Market Foundation, Leon would perceive
Free Market Foundation, the was refusing to come out on that time.
Yes, Leon Lowe from the Free Market Foundation would view this as fairly fairly extreme, because obviously they want less red tape, less regulation of business. They want a completely free environment.
Yeah.
We're slightly different in our perspective. We accept that there are challenges within our society, that all businesses do not behave in the manner that we wish them to behave, that we have inequalities and poverty issues to address. So we accept that there needs to be some government intervention. But what we're concerned about is that this bill crosses the line into going to excessive government intervention. And even within the bill itself, there are inconsistencies. If you look at one of the provisions which states that if a business is not registered within 30 days, if it doesn't hear from the licensing authority within 30 days, then it can deem itself to have been licensed. Now, how do you inspect a deemed license? So you're not addressing the very issue that this bill should go about addressing.
Before we let you go, Naren, just 2 quick points for me. Are you able to quantify for me how much more would be added to compliance with this law in monetary terms, number one? Number two, what's your general sense? Is this going to pass, or do you think government will listen to the voice of business and this thing won't come?
Well, initial indications from some government officials was that this was just a test to see what business thought about this bill.
Yeah.
And clearly, business has spoken out very strongly against this bill. So I have no doubt that even if government decides to proceed, it's not going to be the bill in this form that we eventually see.
Okay.
And that is why we've made a very strong voice come across right now.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I can't put a rand number to compliance, but there is a process underway to address that issue.